All right. Just a quick check whether you can hear me all right. Awesome. All right, cool. So today's webinar workshop is kind of a continuation from the first one. And the idea today is to use kind of what we learned last time, which was creating a Facebook application and requesting some data with a Graph API Explorer and adding it into a Google Sheet. So the prerequisite for being able to do this is having a Facebook application. And I hope you do have one. If not, I'll show you. Either you have to kind of watch the last video, or you can kind of figure it out as we go. The agenda would be to again kind of look back at what we did before, which was doing some simple GET requests in the Graph API Explorer. I'll briefly show how to invalidate an access token. I mentioned this last time already, where I said that if you happen to lose your access token or share it with somebody else, then they have ultimate access to everything that goes on in your ad account. So it makes sense to know how to invalidate it. Then we'll pull some data into Google Sheets, which will be in JSON format, which we'll look at a little bit more. And then we'll use this ImportJSON functionality to kind of reformat the data in Google Sheets, put it into a tabular format, and then connect some insights with some metadata. So spend and impressions on the one side versus budgets or bids on the other. And we'll build a small live dashboard. And if we have time, we can also look at making some changes from Google Sheets and sending things back to Facebook. But let's get into it. So the first thing that, again, you would need to do is going to the Graph API Explorer. And you get there by going to developers.facebook.com/tools/explorer. And if you don't know how to get there, you can also just go to developers.facebook.com and find it at the top in this tool. And so the thing that we did last time was we looked at some simple requests that we made last time, and we used a GET request to access some insights from an account, and we will just kind of do that again now. So for that we need some type of account, and I have my account ready here, which is this account ID. I hope you have one too. If not, you can find it in your ads manager here, or you can just take it from up here. And whenever we request information from an ad account, we need to add this weird ACT underscore in front of it. So when I want to get inside data, which is spend, impressions, etc. data, I need to request the ad account and the insights edge. Again, I hope you remember from last time, there is a way to access edges, which is kind of further assets, further information from a different entity. So in this case, we have the ad account entity, and we asked it for some insight data. And by default, it shows us, I think, data from the last 30 days. This is an ad account we sometimes use for some lead generation. Not much going on here. And there is a way to request a little bit more data by requesting certain fields or changing the time frame. And changing the time frame is done with the date preset parameter. And so in this case, instead of the last 30 days, maybe we want the last 90 days. And this is the way to write it. There would be a way to say lifetime as well, for example. You could also say last 3 days. There are a bunch of different options. Whenever you don't know what the different options are, what you can do is you can go to the documentation and find the relevant entry here. And we're always looking at the marketing API. And in this case, we can look at the reference here. And so what we're doing right now is we're trying to figure out some information about the insights. So the other option would be just searching for insights up here. And going to the Insights API, which is part of the Marketing API. So if we go to the parameters part here, I hope you can follow along. This is where you will find, and I don't know if you can read my URL, but we're in the Marketing API, in Insights, Parameters, and in the current version. Here you can find out any type of date preset that is currently possible to use. So we can use last 14 days, last 28 days, 30 days, 90 days, last week, this year, etc., etc. So this is a good page to bookmark if you're looking for some further information at any point in time. I will may not have time to reference everything today and keep going back. But so in this case, I just wanted to show this to you again. There's a way for us to say we want to look at the last 30 days, and then we can use the time increment parameter to break it up by day, for example, or if we put a 1 here, or we can break it down by week if we put a 7 here, or we can break it down by month by just saying monthly. And so in this case, last 30 days and monthly doesn't really make much sense, because essentially we're requesting data from the 20th of April till the end of April and the 1st of May until yesterday. So that is obviously kind of a stupid thing to do, but we did it anyways. And one more important thing that we would want to know is figuring out how to request insight data on different levels. Level in this case means account, campaign, ad set, or ad. So when we specify level ad set, what it will do, instead of breaking it down by day or week, it will break it down by ad set. So we'll have a lot more information here, and it gives out an ad set ID, campaign ID, account ID, etc. If we now want a little bit more information on these, we can actually specify different fields as well. So if we request fields, we can add things like campaign ID, ad set ID, ad set name, campaign name if we want. And then I'm going to put impressions and spend as well. And I basically just used kind of what it says here already. Just wanted to make sure. And so in this case, we now get an ad set name and campaign name as well. So this is something, a quality assurance campaign that we set up, and then a bunch of other campaigns that ran in the past. So now I hope you remember that there was a way to actually use the information that we have here and request the same exact data in a browser. And the way to do that is by just simply opening up a new browser window. And you can see my Tabagotchi here, being frustrated because I have too many tabs open. The way this works is we essentially, and let me show this back to you here. The way we can request data in the browser is by using this full URL. So graph.facebook.com/v7.0. I'm going to copy paste it over here, and then using this request that we used before, and I'm going to copy that over as well into the URL. And the thing that we're missing now, if I press enter, the information that we get back from Facebook is saying, hey, we need an access token to access this source. And the access token we actually have on the top right here. So if you're in the Graph API Explorer, and if you do have an app, you can just copy this access token, and in the tab that you just opened, at the end, add one more field saying access underscore token equal to this token. And then, et voila, we get the exact same information that we now saw here in this Graph API Explorer, and we have it in the browser. And the next step for us is doing the exact same thing in a Google Sheet. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to copy the exact field up here and go over to my Google Sheet and just put it in here. Right, so I have the full request here, and the way we can now use this in Google Sheets is by using the import function. So there is something that by default exists here. It's called import data, and if we use import data and put in the exact request that we had used before, I'm going to request this one. It will actually now request the exact same information that we said before. And you can see that it sort of resembles what we had just kind of put out before. But it's a little bit hard to read. And that is because this information, I'm sorry, there we go. This information is actually in JSON format. So it's a little bit harder to read. Cool. Just briefly, let me check if anybody has any questions or problems following along. Cool. I'm just seeing Michael saying, do you know if there's a way to use 30-minute or 1-hour date filters? There is a way to get 1-hour date filters, and Solal, the resolution is low. I hope for everyone else the resolution is good enough, but I will make sure to zoom in everywhere I am now. Right. Good. I hope that's better. I hope you can follow along this way. I'll just briefly make sure I'll check again. So Vamshi, you're saying where to add the access token in the link. It's super simple to do this. You just basically add it at the end. So when you have a request like this, in front of this request, we will need this graph.facebook.com/v7.0, and at the end of it, we need access_token equal to the token. So similar to how any of these parameters is used, you can use the access token parameter as well. And one thing I'm going to show you next is, just before we get into it, into the Google Sheet part, is how to invalidate a token. And you'll do this by saying me/permissions and then delete. So if any of you now, I hope not, but if any of you now saw my access token, copied it over, you would be able to use it for anything you want. So you would be able to completely get access to any of my accounts. And so the way to make sure that that doesn't happen is by invalidating it here. So if it ever happens to you that you share an access token with anybody, or you share a Google Sheet where you have an access token in it, then this is a way to invalidate it. And all that you get back is a success is equal to true part. So you just need to, you can do this here in the Graph API Explorer by choosing the delete request. So now that means if I now go back to my browser window here, it actually says, hey, you know, this session is not active anymore. The access token is not valid anymore. So here, what we need to do is generate a new access token. And I think you can't see this right now, but a new window popped up, and I need to go through this login flow again. Nothing that you need to worry about right now, but just kind of good to be aware of me/permissions and then a delete request. So I'll copy this token over again, and I'll go back to my Google Sheet. So the first thing that we'll do to actually make this a little bit more usable is start creating a helper variable that I will call access token. And in Google Sheets, the way you do this, and I'm sure a lot of you know, is by using a named range. So I now copied my access token in here, and just making sure that you can't see it. And the way we can use this now is we can say go to data and say use named ranges, add a range, and here reference the cell where we have the access token. So in this case, it's B1, and I'm just going to call this access token and 2. So the good thing about this now is that whenever we want to access or request, use the access token now in the Google Sheet, we don't actually have to use this super long string of random characters, but we can just use the named variable here. So that's the first thing that I'm going to replace. So in this request, is I will change this bit here, and I will just use the access token variable. And that's not working right now. Okay, I know why. So I need to add this information here. I'm sorry. All right, and now it's kind of registered as a variable here. So if I do this now here, what you can see here in my field, the access token is added again, and this actually does give us some good information. So to make this a little bit easier, I'm just going to push this. I'm just going to copy this, the content of this into this formula directly, and so we don't have to deal with this anymore. So the next thing that we need to do to actually make use of any of this is use something called ImportJSON, and I think I put this somewhere into here. Obviously, I didn't do a good job sharing this, so I'm going to copy this over into my YouTube chat in a second. Sorry about that. So if you go to the link that I just shared with you, you can download this ImportJSON functionality, and the easiest would be just to follow along. This is not something I have built. It's by somebody called Brad Jasper, and all I do is I'll just copy the whole thing over, and what it will do for us is it will allow us to create a custom function within Google Sheets that is able to parse this JSON data into something more usable. So I'm going to go here, copy this over, and back into my Google Sheet. What I need to do is go to Tools, and then Script Editor. So the Script Editor is basically Google's way of giving us the power to build any type of functionality we want. And so when you open it, this is what it should look like. I'm going to say, give it a project name. I'm going to say Facebook scripting, and then I'll just copy paste it in here. And we can save this with Command S or Control S. This didn't work apparently. Facebook scripting. All right, and now it's saved. And so the cool thing is now at the top we already see that we have new functionality available. And if I now go back to my Google Sheet, I can actually use, instead of import data, I can actually use import JSON. And I'm going to press enter here. And now this looks much more like something we can use, right? So we actually have a campaign ID here, we have an ad set ID here, we have an ad set name, etc. So all the information we had before. It looks a bit, some of it looks a bit strange, but we can actually use it in a little better way. So we have this import JSON part now. And one thing that I want to do is I want to make it a little bit easier for us to actually control the request that we're making. So what I'm going to do is I will take all of this part that we used in the Graph API Explorer as well. So I can show you. Maybe I can go back here. So this was the part that we used in the Graph API Explorer, and I'm going to take it out of this query and put it into a separate field. Remove it here, and then add my query up here. So this is basically my query now. At the top, some have a link here. But now what I have is I have my request up here. My path up here, the one that I'm actually requesting, and I have my query up here where I'm importing JSON, right? So this is a little bit more usable, and this is also a lot easier to handle now. So one last thing that we need to do to make this a little bit more usable is when you have the import JSON functionality, there is a way to make it a little bit easier to read out information from this query, and that is by basically going one level deeper into this response here. And let me show you how this works here. So we basically, I'm sorry, I just clicked on something. I need to request it again. So essentially, this is the JSON response that we're getting back from Facebook. We have this data field and we have this paging field. This paging field we really do not care about. We don't want to see that in our Google Sheet. We just want the data field. And so the way we can do this is in the query that we have at the top, we can basically go one level deeper into it and ignore everything that has to do with the paging stuff. And you do this by using this. So it's /data. And that's basically our way of selecting only the data part and ignoring the paging part. And now this almost looks like it could be used for something useful. So we have campaign ID, ad set ID, ad set name, campaign name, impressions, etc. I'm gonna remove this column. So what I want to do now is, maybe some of you are already kind of thinking, what we might be able to do. Maybe I'll add this here, a path, just so we know that we're kind of working with a path here, and maybe I'll mark the cell where we're actually importing the data, so we don't overwrite it. Sometimes it's a little hard to know. So what I want to do now is I want to pull some insight data from 2 different time frames. And then I want to pull some metadata, so kind of campaign settings or ad set settings, and merge this all together into one sheet and have like a little kind of a dashboard. So if one thing that is a little bit annoying about Ads Manager is looking at how different assets changed over time. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how you might be able to build a little bit more useful dashboard or overview. Exactly. Michael is saying, is it possible to pull all pages of data in one query? Yes. Well, it's not possible to get all pages in one query, but you can use a limit. You can use a limit parameter, and in this case, what you would do is you would probably say add an end limit equal to 5,000, and that means that you're actually getting all information out. There's also a way to filter. There's also a way to filter information, and there are quite a few more things. I think the best thing that to kind of go deeper into it would be actually to go to this parameters and field part in the reference of the API. Maybe we can kind of take a look at what else we can look at today. So the one thing that I want to do is basically I want to say, hey, I want to have some insights data on the one side, so I'm going to call it insights. And then I want to have actually a second time frame where I pull data for the same information but on a different time frame. And then I want to have another sheet where I pull metadata like daily budget. So I'm just going to prepare this. One thing that we need to do is make sure that this kind of comes in the right format or in the right order. So I'm going to make a small adjustment, and that is I put the ad set ID at the front, just to make sure that I'm able to do a proper VLOOKUP and match the data correctly. I hope we're all aware of what a VLOOKUP is. If not, the next part may be a bit hard to follow. And I actually want to add some clicks as well here. Now it is possible to get information on any type of action like installs, etc. But there is it would be too long to get into now. But maybe we can do a completely different part in it, or maybe I just record a different video on it. And when we look at the actions data, so this is actually the more useful information. What you can see is here we have landing page views, link clicks, offsite conversions, etc. But unfortunately, the data set looks super weird. Like it looks super strange. It just kind of basically this ImportJSON functionality is not possible, or is not able to use this request in a meaningful way. So it's I can show this to you again here as well when we add the actions. I think it's even clearer here. So when I have actions, this is what we get back. So we have impressions, nice and easy, right? 4,133 spend, super easy. And actions are a nested list. So we kind of have a list of these objects. Curly brackets, yeah, it's basically, it's much harder to get to. There is a way to kind of flatten this information and to actually say, landing page view is equal to 42, link click is equal to 50, etc. But I think it would kind of blow the scope of this this webinar. So we'll ignore action values for now, and we'll just pretend that all we care about is clicks, which I know is not true, but it is the easiest way to kind of get started with it. So what I'll do now is I have my first insights. So I have my 30-day insights on ad set level with a bunch of information. I'm just going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this insights 2. And I'll use a slightly different time frame. In this case, I'll say 90 days. And for you, if you have more data in there, maybe you can say last 3 days and last 7 days, because if you have a lot of information going on, for you to be able to detect a trend, that would be something you could use. There's also a way to actually specify completely custom date ranges or time ranges. You can find this here under the time range parameter. And so instead of using a date preset parameter, we would use the time range one, and where you can actually specify, completely custom dates. And in this case, we're not going to do it. It's a little bit too complex right now. But if you're a wizard with Google Sheets, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to figure this out. And you can build completely custom time frames and pull data over any type, any time frame that you. Of course, you could also pull information, broken down by day. So, for example, if you have a Google Data Studio report where you pull in Google Analytics data, for example, and you want to pull, have a way of getting some information on a daily basis or spend level on a daily basis into a Google Sheet, this is also a very reasonable way to do it. So as you can see here, if I pull this on a daily level, this has a lot more data and it gets a lot more complicated. I won't use it now because I don't need it. So we have 2 insights data. We have the last 90 days and we have last 30 days, just to be able to kind of compare some information with one another. And then what I will also do is I want to request some information about all of the ad sets that we have. And if you remember this from the last time, the way to actually get ad sets information is just by requesting the ad sets edge on the account. And so instead of using insights, we'll just use ad sets. And then all of these parameters that we used here, so the date preset part, the level, etc., don't make sense anymore. But what we do need is we need a way to request some specific fields. So in this case, we can request the ad set ID, the ad set name. We can request something like a daily budget. We can request a bid amount if that's something that you use. Lifetime budget, etc. All of these are possible. So what you can see here now for the information that I put here, actually ad set ID is incorrect because we're requesting ad sets. The field we need to ask for is the ID. So because we're requesting ad sets, we know that this is actually the ad set ID. And so again, I think it's pretty straightforward to understand now. If this is the ad set ID and we have the daily budget here, and here we have the ad set ID and we have the spend, then that's something we can put together into a nice little dashboard. So I'm going to do that now. And the way I will do it, call it dashboard. The way we'll do it is we'll request the ad set ID here. And again, if you're a wizard with Google Sheets, you can do this all dynamically with queries or with VLOOKUPs, index match, whatever. I'm going to do it fairly kind of straightforward. All I'm going to say is I want all unique ad sets that you can find in this range. And I'm already making sure that I can kind of manage, further ad sets in the future because we're, allowing it to go up to 1,000 rows. So if I now want to have some more information here, like my ad set name, well, it's pretty easy. The ad set name, sorry, let me go back up here. Ad set name is actually not in here yet, so I made the same mistake here. So again, if we want to have the ad set name, we just need the name parameter or the name field, because we're already requesting ad sets. That means we have it here. So if we want to get the ad set name in here, we can do a VLOOKUP, a vertical lookup, and for that we need the search key as the input parameter, and then a range where we look this up. So in this case, I want to go into this ad set field, into the ad set one, It's not. Oh my goodness. That was messy. All right, we want to go to adsets A4 until, let's say, E21. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if it's working for you. Normally this would work. So the range we're looking at is adsets A4 to E21. I'm just going to make sure that this range always stays the same. We can actually look up at a larger range as well. And the next one we'll need is the index. So what column is this in? I know this already. It's in column 3, and we want the exact match, right? So we have column 1, column 2, column 3. If we want to get the daily budget, for example, it will be in column 4. So maybe that's something we should do as well. I'll add one more here and say we want the campaign ID. And I'll make sure we can copy this over here and over here. So we have the daily budget, the ad set name, the campaign ID, and this is in column 2. And this is in column 4. All right, so now we have the same information that we had before from the AdSets way. We can obviously kind of copy this down and have it available here. And so the next thing we want to do is we want to look at, the first time frame. So I'm going to add some rows here, and we'll say time frame 1. And we want to look at spend, clicks, and maybe calculate a cost per click. And then we want the same over here. So we want to have the time frame 2, where we pull the same information over here. And I hope this is all pretty readable still. And obviously, this is not so much magic anymore. If you're good with Google Sheets, but I'll do it anyways. So again, we need a few more VLOOKUPs in this case. So I'll copy this one over. But in this case, we actually want to look at insights at the insights1 table. Insights1 table, and the spend information is in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in column 6, and clicks is in column 7. So I'll look this up. Clicks, this is column 6, and this field is not big enough. This range is not big enough. Apologies. So I'll go back here. So we're all the way up to I. So what we need is to change this range. And so now we pulled the information over there. Again, I'm going to copy this over here and also use column 7 because we know that's where the clicks are. And then there's this wonderful, great calculation, the cost per click. I'll just make sure this is reasonable. So now that works, we can copy this over here. And as you can see, a lot of the columns actually don't have any data. So we do need an if error function in here that just makes sure that when we don't have any data, we just show an empty row. And I'll just copy this all the way over here and make sure we have this everywhere else as well. And if error. All right. Cool. So now we can copy this over here to time frame 2 as well. And I will do a search and replace. So for me, that's Control H. It will be Command H for anybody on Mac. And I will search within this formula in the specific range. And I will replace insights1 with insights2. So I'm looking at the right part. There we go. So now we have information in here. We're looking at ad set, at these different ad sets and their performance over time frame 1, time frame 2. Right now we don't know what the time frame is, so let's make sure we actually add it here. And in this case, if you remember, we were looking at the last 30 days, and here we were looking at the last 90 days. And so one thing that we can do is actually replace this part of the request with the dynamic input here. So I will do this now. We need to make sure that this is kind of seen as a string. This way. Okay, I made a mistake. I need to actually reference this part. So we're looking at dashboard F2. Dashboard F2. I don't know why it's not automatically doing this for me. But now you can see we actually pull this information dynamically from here. So I can actually, for example, say lifetime now, and this will change almost instantly. It takes a second to load. And let's just make sure we do the same over here. So this is I2. We're looking at I2. So here as well, we need to make sure this is recognized as a string. Then remove this part. And make sure we say dashboard I2. Add this at the end. And now we can see this shows up at last 90 days. Again, if we wanted to, just to make sure this works, this is now pulled automatically. All right. The one thing that we're still missing is actually this daily budget is incorrect because Facebook, as we said last time, Facebook, always gives the data back in cents, at least if you're in euros, or in dollars, or pence if it's pounds. Basically the smallest amount. So in this case, we want to make sure that we divide it by 100. So this actually, represents the actual daily budget here. And this is almost it that I definitely want to get done today. I make sure that I have kind of, specified which fields are variables, because it gets a lot harder. Otherwise, one thing that you could do, for example, now is specify all of the available date presets here, for example. And I think it's fairly straightforward how to do this. So what we could do is we could actually copy the date preset from here, and in this field use the data validation functionality and say list of items, and just copy this over here. And so now we actually get a drop-down of all available timeframes. And so last 7 days, last 30 days, last 90 days, etc. Right? So this is, and I'll copy this over here as well. So we kind of have our 2 timeframes, and we have the data validation in here. So we can now use this to completely dynamically, add 2 timeframes here. Again, we don't have more information, but I hope it still makes sense. We're kind of 2 minutes before the end. But what I'll do now anyways, because this will go up as a video anyway, so for anybody that doesn't have any time, you can maybe come look at it at a later point. Thanks for joining in any case. And what I want to do is actually show you how you can send information back to Facebook. So everything that we've been doing so far has basically been mirroring this GET request, and a GET request can be done by any browser, right? So we can fetch data in a way. Any browser can do it. You can do it by just entering the right URL. You can use it from here, but it's a little bit harder to actually make changes to a campaign, because for that what we need is a POST request. And look up GET or POST requests if that doesn't mean anything to you. For now, all you need to know is whenever you want to make a change, like create an ad, edit an ad set, edit a bid, you need a POST request. And so Google Sheets, by default, doesn't support making POST requests. It only supports GET requests. And so for us to be able to use POST requests, we need another custom functionality that we can put into here. And so there's something super cool which allows us to add custom functionality to any Google Sheet. So and allows to actually add buttons up here. So we can add like our custom little buttons up here. And the way I want to use this is I want to be able to make budget changes to my ad sets that I have put up here. Of course, if you're using campaign budget optimization, then you would have to do this whole thing on a campaign level, but hopefully you can follow along, at least get the idea. So I want to be able from here, if I kind of realize that one ad set or one campaign is not doing so well and I'll reduce the budget or increase the budget, I want to have a column where I can just change the budget, or like type in a new budget, and then have a button that sends this information back to Facebook. And for us to do that, I hope you remember this from last time. If we wanted to make a change, for example, to this ad set, what we would need to do is, I'm going to show it to you first in the Graph API Explorer. We need the ad set ID, and I'll put it in here. So now we have we have an ad set ID here. So what we need to do is we need to ask it for its daily budget, right? Daily budget. So now we have 35 euros, right? Or 3,500 cents. If we want to change it, what we do is we say, add another parameter saying daily budget is now equal to, let's say 34. And so if you do this now with a GET request, nothing changes. But if we do it with a POST request, we actually make a live change, right? So that made a live change. So what we need to do is we basically need to build this URL, if you want, in the sheets, and then find a custom functionality to be able to push this information to back to Facebook. So I'm just going to copy this over here. And so what we need to do is, let's say we want to change this back to 35 euros. We basically, what we need to do is we need to create a link that basically, that we can use to post information back to Facebook. So for that, here's what it should look like. So we should say, it should be hyperlink, right? Hyperlink. And it should be, the regular request that we normally use. So graph.facebook.com/v7 slash, now we need the ad set, right? So we need the ad set ID. I'm going to say it's in B5. We need the ad set ID, and then we need to add all of this other stuff that I had already copied over. So didn't work. So we need question mark fields equal to daily budget and daily budget equal to, and now we need to have the variable input again. So we need this times 100. And the last thing that we need, again, as always, is an access token. Access token. And here what we can do is use the variable that we created before. So if we now had this, basically we now created the link that we can use to push data back to Facebook. I'll shorten it again. And I will actually make sure that we have this available for all of these ones, but only if there's actually something in the field next to it. So I'm going to add an if this is unequal to nothing, then create the link. If not, don't bother. All right. So what we'll do now is we'll create a new functionality within Google Scripts, within the script editor, that looks at this column and looks whether in any of these cells there is a link. And if there is a link, it will make a post request, and that post request should change whatever is going on in Facebook. I'll show you how to do that. It's a little bit more complicated. I will share, if you can't follow along, I will share the exact script. Actually, maybe let's do that. I've shared the exact script in this presentation, and maybe I'll just copy it over since we're running out of time. I'll just copy over this sheet, and I'll make sure to share this with you so you can follow along. Anyone can view. Right, post it here. And then maybe you can follow along as well. So what you can do is, I'll just kind of copy it over to make it a little bit faster. Copy this script over, go back to the script editor. So go back to Tools, Script Editor. I still have it open here. And create a new function, a new script file. And I'm going to call it custom menu. And in here, we have two functions that we actually are going to use. The first one, whenever the Google Sheet opens, we add these new menu buttons to it. And I could not, code this, like write this down from the top of my head. No idea. So I always kind of have this available somewhere else. But what we'll do is, so the first function, what it does is it adds a magic button to the top of the spreadsheet, and the second one actually makes the changes that we said before. And so what it does is it pulls, it basically goes into this sheet dashboard. It then looks at the range P5 to P100. So this doesn't make sense. We need N5 to N100. All right, let's change that. N5, N100. Get the values, and then loop through the values. And if you haven't done any type of programming, then this looks super weird to you. But we're basically just looping through. We're basically just going step by step through each value, and we're checking if any of these values, any of these cells, has this HTTP as part of the value in the cell. And if that's the case, we take the value that is in it and we make a post request. So in this, Google Apps Scripts is super weird in this regards. It calls it URL fetch app. Then we use fetch to pull the URL, and then we post here. And I'll just show you what it looks like when using that. So I'm going to refresh the page now that I saved the script editor. Let's see. Oh, at the top now we see a magic button. And when we go to the magic button, we can say send changes to Facebook. And when I do that, okay, I need to say that this is okay. Right, you can't see this now, but if you happen to do this yourself, you basically have to approve that this is allowed to run. I'm going to make sure I do it again. Magic send changes to Facebook. And so it now runs the script, and it actually did it. So I have another function that writes the whatever it did into here, but we can check this as well by going back to the ads manager, and so checking for this ad set. And so I'm going to refresh my ads manager and go back here. And as you can hopefully see, this budget is now 35 euros. And just to show you again, also to verify myself, I'll change it again, and I send 40 euros Facebook, and I'll refresh this page, and now it's 40 euros. There we go. So this went a little bit longer than expected, and I hope the last part was not too complicated. Generally, the idea was to give you an idea of what you might be able to do. Obviously, Facebook is not alone in offering this kind of functionality. It's a little bit harder, for example, to get access to Google or Snapchat. But if you want to pull data into a Google Sheet and then make changes back to it, or even build your own dashboard or ads manager in a way, I think it is completely possible. So thanks a lot for joining in, and let me know what you thought. I think you all have my email address. Also, if you have any requests for things that you would like to look at, let me know, and then we can take a look at it another time. Definitely next Thursday at 5 p.m. Central European Summertime, I'm going to be doing this again. So it's exactly the same time as today, just on a Thursday, not on a Wednesday. And I'll continue to do that for the next coming weeks. Thanks a lot.